welcome back to another episode of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We're going to be reading two chapters today, chapter 13 and chapter 14, and then as usual we're going to do our quiz at the end, so make sure you're listening. Okay, chapter 13, the big day arrives. The sun was shining brightly on the morning of the big day, but the ground was still white with snow and the air was very cold. Outside the gates of Wonka's factory, enormous crowds of people had gathered to watch the 5 lucky ticket holders going in. The excitement was tremendous. It was just before 10 o'clock. The crowds were pushing and shouting, and policemen with arms linked were trying to hold them back from the gates. Right beside the gate, in a small group that was carefully shielded from the crowds by the police, stood the 5 famous children together with the grown-ups who had come with them. The tall, bony figure of Grandpa Joe could be seen standing quietly among them, and beside him, holding tightly onto his hand, was little Charlie Bucket himself. All the children except Charlie had both their mothers and fathers with them, and it was a good thing that they had, otherwise the whole party might have got out of hand. They were so eager to get going that their parents were having to hold them back by force to prevent them from climbing over the gates. "Be patient," cried the fathers. "Be still. It's not time yet. It's not 10 o'clock. Behind him, Charlie Bucket could hear the shouts of the people in the crowd as they pushed and fought to get a glimpse of the famous children. "There's Violet Brigard," he heard someone shouting. "That's her, all right. I can remember her face from the papers." "And you know what?" someone else shouted back. "She's still chewing that dreadful old piece of gum she's had for 3 months. You look at her jaws. They're still working on it." "Who's the big fat boy?" "That's Augustus Gloop." "Oh, so it is. Enormous, isn't he? Fantastic." "Who's the kid with a picture of the Lone Ranger stenciled on his wind cheater?" "That's Mike TV. He's the television find. He must be crazy. Look at all those toy pistols he's got hanging all over him." "The one I want to see is Veruca Salt," shouted another voice in the crowd. "She's the girl whose father bought 500,000 chocolate bars and then made the workers in the peanut factory unwrap every one of them until they found a golden ticket. He gives her everything she wants, absolutely anything. She only has to start screaming for it and she gets it." "Dreadful, isn't it? Shocking, I call it. Which do you think is her?" "That one over there on the left, the little girl in the silver mink coat." "Which one is Charlie Bucket?" "Charlie Bucket? He must be that skinny little shrimp standing beside the old fellow who looks like a skeleton very close to us, just there. See him? Why hasn't got a coat on in this cold weather? Don't ask me. Maybe he can't afford to buy one. Goodness me, he must be freezing." Charlie, standing only a few paces away from the speaker, gave Grandpa Joe's hand a squeeze, and the old man looked down at Charlie and smiled. Somewhere in the distance, a church clock began striking 10. Very slowly, with a loud creaking of rusty hinges, the great iron gates of the factory began to swing open. The crowd became suddenly silent. The children stopped jumping about. All eyes were fixed upon the gates. "There he is!" someone shouted. "That's him!" And so it was. Chapter 14. Mr. Willy Wonka. Mr. Wonka was standing all alone just inside the open gates of the factory, and what an extraordinary little man he was. He had a black top hat on his head. He wore a tailcoat made of a beautiful plum-coloured velvet. His trousers were bottle green. His gloves were pearly grey, and in one hand he carried a fine gold-topped walking cane covering his chin. There was a small, neat, pointed black beard, a goatee, and his eyes were most marvellously bright. They seemed to be sparkling and twinkling at you all the time. The whole face, in fact, was alight with fun and laughter. And how clever he looked, how quickly and sharp and full of life. He kept making quick, jerky little movements with his head, cocking it this way and that, and taking everything in with those bright, twinkling eyes. He was like a squirrel in the quickness of his movements, like a quick, clever old squirrel from the park. Suddenly he did a funny little skipping dance in the snow, and he spread his arms wide, and he smiled at the 5 children who were clustered near the gates, and he called out, "Welcome, my little friends, welcome to my factory." His voice was high and fluty. "Will you come forward one at a time, please?" he called out, and bring your parents. Then show me your golden ticket and give me your name. Who's first? The fat boy stepped up. "I'm Augustus Gloop," he said. "Augustus," Mr. Wonka, seizing his hand and pumping it up and down with terrific force. "My dear boy, how good to see you. Delighted, charmed, overjoyed to have you with us. And these are your parents? How nice. Come in, that's right. Step through the gates." Mr. Wonka was clearly just as excited as everybody else. "My name," the next child to go forward, "is Veruca Salt." "My dear Veruca, how do you do? What a pleasant pleasure this is. You do have an interesting name, don't you? I always thought that Veruca was a sort of wart you got on the sole of your foot, but I must be wrong, mustn't I? How pretty you look in your lovely mink coat. I'm so glad you could come. Dear me, this is going to be such an exciting day. I do hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you will. I know you will. Your father, how are you, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Salt? Overjoyed to see you. Yes, the ticket is quite in order. Please go in." The next 2 children, Violet Bigard and Mike TV, came forward to have their tickets examined and then to have their arms practically pumped off their shoulders by the energetic Mr. Wonka. And last of all, a small nervous voice whispered, "Charlie Bucket." "Charlie!" cried Mr. Wonka. Well, so there you are. You're the one who only found your ticket yesterday, aren't you?" Yes, I read all about it in the morning papers. Just in time, my dear boy. I'm so glad. I'm so happy for you. And this is your grandfather. Delighted to meet you, sir. Overjoyed, enraptured, enchanted, all right. Excellent. Is everybody in now? 5 children. Yes, good. Now will you please follow me? Our tour is about to begin. But do keep together. Please don't wander off by yourselves. I shouldn't like to lose any of you at this stage of the proceedings. Oh dear me, no. Charlie glanced back over his shoulder and saw the great iron entrance gate slowly closing behind him. The crowds on the outside were still pushing and shouting. Charlie took a last look at them, and as the gate closed with a clang, all sight of the outside world disappeared. "Here we are," cried Mr. Wonka, trotting along in front of the group. "Through this big red door, please. That's right, it's nice and warm inside. I have to keep it warm inside the factory because of the workers. My workers are used to an extremely hot climate. They can't stand the cold. They'd perish if they went outdoors in this weather. They'd freeze to death." "But who are these workers?" asked Augustus Gloop. "All in good time, my dear boy," said Mr. Wonka, smiling at Augustus. "Be patient. You'll see everything as we go along. Are all of you inside? Good. Would you mind closing the door? Thank you." Charlie Bucket found himself standing in a long corridor that stretched away in front of him as far as he could see. The corridor was so wide that a car could easily have been driven along it. The walls were pale and lighting was soft and pleasant. "How lovely and warm," whispered Charlie. "I know, and what a marvellous smell," answered Grandpa Joe, taking a long, deep sniff. All the most wonderful smells in the world seemed to be mixed up in the air around them. The smell of roasting coffee and burnt sugar and melting chocolate and mint and violets and crushed hazelnuts and apple blossom and caramel and lemon peel. And far away in the distance from the heart of the great factory came a muffled roar of energy, as though some monstrous gigantic machine was spinning its wheels with a breakneck speed. "Now this, my dear children," said Mr. Wonka, raising his voice above the noise. "This is the main corridor. Will you please hang your coats and hats on the pegs over there? And then follow me. That's the way. Good. Everyone ready? Come on then. Here we go." He trotted off rapidly down the corridor with tails of his plum-coloured velvet coat flapping behind him, and all the visitors hurried after him. It was quite a large party of people, when you come to think of it. There were 9 grown-ups and 5 children, 14 in all, so you can imagine that there were a good deal of pushing and shoving as they hustled and bustled down the passage, trying to keep up with the swift little figure in front of them. "Come on, cried Mr. Wonka. "Get a move on, please. We'll never get round today if you dawdle like this." Soon he turned right off the main corridor into another slightly narrower passage. Then he turned left, then left again, then right, then left, then right, then right, then left. The place was a gigantic rabbit warren with passages leading the way, and that's in every direction. "Don't let go of my hand, Charlie," whispered Grandpa Joe. "Notice how all these passages are sloping downwards," called up Mr. Wonka. "We're going underground. All the most important rooms in my factory are deep down below the surface." "Why is that?" somebody asked. "There wouldn't be nearly enough space for them up on top," answered Mr. Wonka. "These rooms we are going to see are enormous. They're larger than football fields. No building in the world could be big enough to house them. But down here, underneath the ground, I've got all the space I want. There's no limit, so long as I hollow it out." Mr. Wonka turned right, he turned left, he turned right again. The passages were sloping steeper and steeper, downhill now. Then suddenly, Mr. Wonka stopped. In front of him, there was a shiny metal door. The party crowded round. On the door, in large letters, it said, "The Chocolate Room." Question time. Right, we'll get cracking, and remember to pause it to give yourself some time to answer it, okay? Charlie went with Grandpa Joe, but who came with the other children? Was it their grandparents, their mothers, their fathers, or their parents? So is it A, grandparents, B, grandmothers, C, fathers, or D, their parents? Pause the video. Of course, it was D, their parents. Everyone else took both their mummies and daddies. What is Miss Veruca Salt wearing? Was it A, a silver coat, B, a gold coat, C, a grey coat, or D, a black coat? Pause the video. It was A, a silver coat. It was a silver mink coat. Okay, question 3, there are 2 answers. Okay, so question 3, 2 answers. What was Willy Wonka wearing? Was it a black top hat? Was he wearing some green gloves? Or was he wearing a purple tailcoat? Pause the video. He was wearing A, a top hat, and C, a purple tailcoat. Okay, question 4. In what order do the children enter the factory? Now, there are 2 possible answers for this. Was it A, Augustus, then Veruca, then Violet, then Mike, then Charlie? The book doesn't say. In the order they found the tickets, or was it Augustus, Veruca, Mike, Violet, and Charlie? Which one? Pause the video. Okay, so the answers you could have had there were A and C. So the order that they found the tickets, and then or Augustus, Veruca, Violet, Mike, and Charlie. First of all, they go through a door, but what colour is the door? Is it black, green, blue, or red? Pause the video. It's a big red door, you were right, it was D. Number 6, what colour are the walls in the main corridor? Is it A, dark pink, B, bright pink, C, pale pink, or D, light pink? Pause the video. It was C, pale pink. Think of candy floss, that's how I remembered it. So number 7, how big was the group? Was it A, 12 people, B, 15 people, C, 14 people, or D, 13 people? Pause the video. Okay, so there were 9 grown-ups and 5 children. So of course it was C, 14 people. Question 8. What starts to happen to the passages? They start to get smaller, they start to get darker, they start to go downwards, and they start to go upwards. Pause the video. It was C, they start to go down because he's got underground buildings so that he's got more room. Last question, what does it say on the shiny metal door? The chocolate area, the chocolate room, or the room of chocolate? Pause the video. It was, of course, the chocolate room, which is also the name of the next chapter. So I'll see you next time.